I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Tatyana Mamut, Pendo's SVP of New Products. She co-founded IDEO's organizational design practice and co-led the creation of AWS Honeycode, so that she has been helping large enterprises adapt to the future of work for over a decade. Tatyana, over to you.
Thanks so much, Todd. So here we all are. We're all virtual for now. And now is really the time for us to think again about how we work. We just heard so many tips from Adam Grant about how we might adjust our mindsets, our own individual behaviors and practices. But how do we adjust the digital workplace? How do we think about the work environment? How do we redesign the work environment and not just go back to a return to normal and assume that we know what normal was? So how do we actually question our assumptions and think again about how we work? So over the last few years, we've all been going through this digital transformation, and even more so in 2020. And really, digital transformation has been a story of more and more and more. We want more applications. We've been working more in software. In fact, the average company now spends 50% more every year on SaaS applications. And so we're using so many more applications. But at the same time, we've also underinvested in getting them to really add value. So while the average employee today says that they use about 15 SaaS applications, they also report that only about a third of those are empowering and easy. And then we can see that there's really a gap in how employers and employees are perceiving this transformation. So employers are overwhelmingly saying that they are helping their employees adapt to new work habits, but employees, less than 40% of them agree with that. They think that they're on their own, trying to adapt and trying to adjust. So what are we doing wrong? Well, one of the things is that old school training, having everybody go to a training session to learn new software, is really not the solution. And what we see is that when we do that, when we train people out of context and expect them to remember these new workflows and where to click and all those kinds of things, 70% of that training content is lost in 24 hours. That's not the employee's fault. That's just how the human mind works. So, how do we think again? And what should we do? Well, here, I'm going to step back for a moment and tell you a story. I grew up in New Jersey, was a teenager in New Jersey, just over the George Washington Bridge from Manhattan. So I learned to drive in New Jersey. When I was 17, I learned that at a red light, you were able to turn on red. Perfectly legal, perfectly normal. The first time I drove over the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, I did the same thing. I did what I had been doing for years, right? I stopped at a red light, I turned right on red, and I got a ticket. And so what should a city like New York do? Should they post a sign on every street corner just in case a kid from New Jersey drives over the bridge for the very first time, that New York City law is that there's no turn on red? And then what happens? Do they post a sign on every street corner about every eventuality, about every person who might come into contact with an issue or might not know what to do? Where does that lead us? Where does a proliferation of communications lead us? It's a cacophony of signposts, guides, messages, training, communications. That doesn't seem like the right solution. What you'd want a way to just show the right message to the right person at the right time. You'd want that teenager driving over the George Washington Bridge from New Jersey for the very first time to see the sign, but no one else. You want to know who that person is, what their previous behaviors are, so that you could know what message they needed in the moment. And that would take away friction. So with that in mind, maybe we should think in the work context about three things. and prompt these things to help us to think again. The first is transitioning our mindset from more software to getting the most from it. The second is to bring IT and training closer together. And the third is to make digital transformation really a two-way process. So let's talk about these. The first, from more software to getting the most from it. So this is a very sad and tragic statistic. So someone in your organization planned and had a vision for your digital transformation. Someone made a bet on new software, right? Maybe that person was really smart. They probably were smart. Or maybe they were an executive. But still, less than 30% of those plans for digital transformation succeed, which means the vast majority don't go the way that they were intended. And what we see is that where the rubber really hits the road is in the employee experience, right? Because in these transformations, as we expect people to work differently, about half of employees say they experience high levels of digital friction. So how do we actually think about the fact that the experience of employees is not one size fits all? It can't be just planned, right? We need to listen to employees, and we need to create the right support for the right employee at the right time. The second one is to bring IT and training closer. In our organizations, we used to think about different silos. We used to have people, the HR people, and that was a silo, and we used to have the tech people, right, in IT. And those people, when there were big projects, they would be planned in one place and then sort of communicated to the other place, maybe even thrown over the wall, right, for implementation. And we're seeing that that is really starting to change because people and technology need to be transformed together. People and tech changes need to be planned and executed hand in hand. And the other thing we're seeing is that tech leaders are becoming more tech savvy and IT leaders are becoming more people savvy. So you'll see Beth Galetti, she is a longtime head of human resources at Amazon, and she recently updated her public LinkedIn profile to SVP of People, Experience, and Technology, right? This is really an understanding of how career trajectories in HR are changing to be very much focused on user experience, people experience, employee experience, and technology, not just one or the other. So how might we rethink our HR and IT silos by bringing people, systems, and processes much closer together? And the third is to make change a two-way process. As we know, the old saying goes that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So again, those strategic plans for digital transformation, those things that very smart people planned, if they were planned for the top down without knowledge about what's happening from the bottoms up, then they often go awry. Because top-down processes, business processes, are often eaten away by bottom-up practices, right? So it's really important to understand what people are doing on the ground, what kinds of workflows currently exist in your organization, what kinds of habits and behaviors are employees actually engaged in, right? Before you implement a digital transformation, before you bring change into the organization, how do you know? How do you see? How do you have the organizational insight to understand how these new processes, whether they will be very disruptive or will they be just an evolution on what people are doing? And who? Will they be disruptive for whom? Or will they be an evolution for whom, right? How do we get that deep organizational insight? And the other piece is that you might be surprised. Once you actually see what your employees are doing, you might discover that they know things that you don't. They might actually have better digital workflows than you could have planned or that their managers could have imagined, right? How do you learn from the practices of employees and really drive change by understanding not just top-down what people should do, but bottoms-up what they are doing? So how might we understand and learn from what employees are actually doing, not just what we wish they were doing? So with these three things, we can start to think again about a bespoke digital workplace. And we say bespoke because the reality is that your business processes are your secret sauce, right? You want to maintain your competitive advantage, and so you need something that is bespoke, you need something that is particular to you. And so one-size-fits-all solutions or templated solutions aren't going to allow you to maintain that competitive advantage, aren't going to allow your organization to maintain its uniqueness. So as we design this bespoke digital workplace, we also need to discover what our employees are doing to deliver the right message to the right employee in the right app and at the right time. And if we can do that, if we can learn from them and we can give each employee a personalized nudge when they need it, maybe then we can start to take away some of this friction and drive digital transformation at a more successful rate. So Pendo Adopt is a product, is a solution that has been helping many organizations start to drive this digital transformation through an insights-first solution, right? So understanding what employees are doing and then crafting the messages, the communications, and the nudges to help employees deal with transformation in a positive and healthy way. And one customer is Remax, which actually implemented a new CRM system globally across an extremely distributed workplace. Let's take a look at what Remax has done.
There are so many moving parts in a real estate transaction today. It goes way beyond just showing someone a home. Everything from mortgage, finance, movers, the customer can really rely on us as a total resource.
Remax is a global company. When we're launching software, we have to think about how we're going to train the entire world. We know that we cannot be in every single country training them in person, so we had to think of a new way to do that. We've used Pendo in user testing and at GA, and having the analytics allows us to understand what the user wants in the product, what trainings we need to improve on, who's logged in, how often they're clicking on things, when they're logging in, and that type of information is gold for a training staff.
Prior to having Pendo in the building, one of the challenges we had was every time we had a change with our technology, it was a communications nightmare to get that information out to our membership. Now it's available as soon as it happens inside the app, and our users are informed.
Pendo has given the agent the freedom to learn whenever they have time.
So here we can see that organizational insight allows organizations to transform in healthier, more productive ways. But we know we can do even better. We're going to show you a vision of where we think digital adoption is headed in the next few years. So imagine that your organization has a new sales rep. Her name is Angie. She's an experienced sales rep. She has 20 years of experience. She's used Salesforce many times before, and in her new organization, they use Salesforce too. No problem, right? Well, Angie knows, and you know, that every company's Salesforce is different. The workflows are different, the business processes are different, there are custom objects, there are custom fields, right? And they have a training session for new sales reps that's scheduled for next week. But Angie wants to get started today. She doesn't want to wait for the training session, and she doesn't want to bug her manager or her colleagues, many of whom are distributed all over the world. So how could she actually go into Salesforce today and start bringing her contacts into her company's new instance, company's particular instance of Salesforce? Let's take a look. So here, Angie logs in to Salesforce, and the first thing she sees is a little browser extension. And that browser extension can help her get onboarded and learn what she needs to learn without reaching out for help. Here, she sees that there are onboarding modules that she needs to do, obviously some security training, set up her workday, set up her direct deposit, those types of things. There are also some custom guides that her company has created for Salesforce, specifically for new sales reps. And here, she sees that she wants to bring in her contacts so she can learn how her new company wants her to create a new contact. She goes in, clicks on New, and now she encounters the dreaded custom field. That field, she doesn't know what this is. Her old company never used this field, the new company does, but there's also a prompt that helps her understand what she's supposed to do at her new company and where to find this information. She doesn't drop off, she doesn't call anyone for help, and she doesn't wait for the sales training. She uses the tip to transition into another app that gives her the information, helps her find the information, so she can just keep going. Goes back, enters the information, clicks Save, and there we go. On her very first day, Angie was able to start using her company's new Salesforce that she has never encountered before, and be able to transition very quickly. And now a little feedback modal pops up asking her, how do we do, right? She gets to enter how she experienced the guide that was created for new sales reps, fill in some feedback, and submit. So here we see inside Pendo Adopt, how do we imagine the organization? How do we get insight into how the organization is working? And then how do we build a custom experience for new sales reps like the one that Angie just experienced? So here inside Pendo Adopt, we see an overview slide. This overview slide helps leaders understand how are people working in the digital workplace? What are they using? How much time are they spending in the apps? And what are the transitions and the transformations that are happening? Here we kind of see, there seems to be a trend happening with Workday. Let's zoom in on that a little bit more and see that as Workday has ramped up, that's interesting, the use of Google Suite has decreased in our organization. We might want to dive in and understand why that is. We also see how employees in the organization are spending their time, about 37 hours a week, and then break in the digital workplace, in their digital applications. Now let's see how that breaks down. They're spending a lot of time in G Suite. That's great. The sentiment there is positive. You know, that's working well. They're also spending a lot of time in Oracle. And maybe that sentiment is not that high, and you might want to dive in and see which workflows are working for people, which ones might need to be augmented, or where people might need to have a little bit more support. You can also dive in and set some organizational goals. Remember how I said that only 30% of digital transformations succeed? Well, there are probably some goals that you've broken down across the organization around your digital transformation, and you want to track those. And you want to understand how you're doing to those individual goals. You might want to dive in and see which people are actually helping, right, achieve those goals, and which ones are facing that digital friction that we talked about. So here, IT department is doing great to our company goal of migrating to Workday. The sales department, not so much. And so they might need some specialized messages, some specialized nudges, and some help perhaps in the application itself to get the organization to its goal. Now, workflows are a very important and critical part of understanding the employee experience and how engaged people are in their workflows and how efficient they are in their workflows. And workflows are essentially the paths that people follow in their day-to-day work. So let's see what kinds of workflows we have in our organization and see how they're working. So the Create a Salesforce Contact workflow, let's dive into that and let's see what people are doing. So here we see that there are two paths. You think people are following the top path. That's the desired path. That's the most efficient path. And here, when people follow this path, they spend just over a minute, right, completing the new contact form. It's very easy. If you're an experienced person using Salesforce, you probably think this is super simple. But not that many new sales reps are actually able to discover this most efficient path. But there's another one here that they are following that also allows them to complete the workflow, but it takes much longer. It takes over 16 minutes, and there's this strange step here in the middle, which is in Gmail, composing a new email. So what are people doing? They might get stuck, right, in not being able to fill in that new required field, that new custom field. And so they're emailing someone in the organization. They're asking for help. Maybe they're asking, asking their manager, a colleague, a sales ops person. They're doing something in Gmail that's actually slowing them down and creating friction from completing the workflow. So we go back to the ideal workflow and we ask ourselves, how do we actually create a guide to get everybody else, right, that's either dropped out of this workflow or that's taken the less efficient workflow and create a guide for them so that the next time they come in, they know how to proceed. Well, we can click right here and right from these 4 steps, create a guide right in the application, right in Salesforce, and we pre-populate the 4 steps because we know that's the most efficient workflow. We come in, type in some instructions to let our users, our employees know what to do, and then we just save and publish the guide. It's that easy. And then, after the guide has been published, people have been using it for a while, you can dive right in to see how well it's working. And here we have completion rates, right? What is the completion rate of the workflow with the guide versus without the guide? We can see how well the guide is working. We can see how well our nudges how effective they are in terms of what we've developed, what we've created. And we can also dive in and see some more metrics. We can see who's using it, where they're using it. We can see the amount of time that people are spending on the guide. We're also bringing in employee metadata, right, by role, by location, to really understand where are people experiencing the most success with particular messaging, communications, and training that we're providing, and where are people struggling. It might differ, right, by department, by function, by role, or by location. And we need to have all of that granular insight to really serve our employees well. We also see a step-by-step, funnel in terms of how many people, use the guide, how many people drop off, in order to help us understand how to make that guide better and how to keep working toward an environment and a set of instructions that are truly empowering and easy for all employees. And remember that feedback that Angie put in? Well, we can view her feedback and all the employee feedback as well. So we get to understand not just quantitatively what people are doing, but also how are people feeling about the support that they're getting. So we start to kind of meet this trust gap. We start to close this trust gap by really understanding if employees are feeling good about the messages, the communications, the training, and the help that they're getting from us, or if they're still facing friction and what that friction is. So we have some of the top-rated guides, some of the areas that people are saying, yes, I feel really supported, really helped in this, and maybe some of the lowest-rated guides, right? Places that we need to go back to, that we need to understand where the experience is failing. And we can dive in to a particular guide, of course, a particular piece of training. We can see how people are responding to that guide step by step. We can, of course, read all the comments. We can dive in deep to really understand how to engage and support our employees. So with that vision, we believe that digital adoption is headed in the direction where the right person will see the right app at the right time, and where we will get to a world where just that kid from New Jersey, their first time over the George Washington Bridge, will see the sign that they need, but no one else needs to see it, right? How do we get rid of the cacophony of training and messages constantly bombarding us in the digital workplace and give us only what we need? And so if we go back to thinking again about the digital workplace, we can work together to adopt our software better, adopt our best practices seamlessly, and adapt to the future faster. We can do this. We need the right tools, and we invite you to continue with us on this day and on this journey to really talk, share, and learn about how digital adoption and the digital workplace will evolve and transform. So up next, we're going to learn from the pioneers of digital adoption, folks who are practitioners, who are driving change within their organizations, who are thinking deeply about the virtual and the non-virtual workplaces coming together, and how they're evolving, how they're transforming, and how we can keep engaging and informing our employees toward a better future. So now we're going to take a short break. Please take this opportunity to stretch your legs, visit the product spotlights, and grab some coffee. We have over 2,000 amazing registrants for this conference, and many of you are CIOs, CISOs, and heads of HR. So this is a unique opportunity to meet each other in the speed networking area. Have fun. We'll see you back here at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time to continue our program. Don't miss it.